Got it.
Okay. Well, we are going to begin. It's 12:01. Thank you all for being here. We have over 89 participants so far, expecting about 120 or more. Obviously, we have tapped into a need because we just put this out and 122 people immediately responded. So my name's Eileen Melody. I am currently the chairman of the CSCA, serving until the end of June, which has been a wonderful experience. So we're glad that you were here with us today. We would like to begin today. Our Executive Director, Michelle Catucci, would like to lead us in a moment of kind of focus, recentering, meditation. If you could just take this minute and focus in on it, Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Catucci. And I will be forthcoming. I'm actually stealing this directly from the principal at Cheshire High School. So we had a team meeting yesterday. We have a group called CORE that meets every Tuesday that's made up of our admin team and then our student support staff, some members of special education, our school nurse, some member from the Cheshire Police Force. But we meet every week to talk about kind of issues of concerns with our students. And certainly this was something that we needed to talk about yesterday. And she started our meeting off this way to really help us guide our conversations yesterday, coming from a place of love and gratitude and how we can support our students. And that resonated with me when I did it yesterday with my team. So I asked Eileen if it would be okay if we would start this meeting that way as well. So I invite all of you to take a moment to get in a comfortable position. Perhaps close your eyes or have a soft gaze at the floor below you. But start this meeting off with taking in a few deep breaths. So if we breathe in for 4 and back out. Let's do one more together. In for 4 and back out. And I want you to take this opportunity as you continue your breathing to think about a person who brings light into your heart. Someone you are very grateful for, that person that maybe you go to in these tough times to find peace, to find support, to find love. And I want you just to think about that person for the next 10 seconds and put them in your focus. Concentrate on the positive, warm light that this person brings into your life. I invite you to continue to think about this person and this feeling as we engage in our conversation today, and as you go off into the rest of your day, the rest of your week, the rest of your school year, so that we can be leading our students, we can be working with our colleagues, and we can be supporting our friends, family, one another, and everyone we come in contact with love and light in our heart. Let's take one last deep breath together. In for 4 and back out. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes, focus back on our conversation, and I look forward to having this time with all of you now.
Thank you, Michelle. That was beautiful. And certainly we rarely get an opportunity in the middle of a day to take a few extra breaths. So I can appreciate that. For the next 45 minutes or so, we would like to offer this time, this space to you, school counselors, to show support for you and the work that you're doing with your students around the topic of what's going on in our country with racial tensions and injustice. And so this is an opportunity for you, those of you who are already engaged in this work with your students, we want you to come forth and share what that work has been like. And for those of you who have yet to do that, please just take a few minutes, maybe gather and ask some questions or think about what it is that you still need to know in order to move forward. So the focus really is, as school counselors, how do we support our school communities, our students who are not with us face to face? So this is proposes another challenge for many of us. But so I'm going to throw that out there. I'm a believer in collaboration, and a believer in hearing people's voices and exchanging ideas with one another. We're a very professional group of people. You've inspired me in the past. So, you know, Michelle and I talked about doing this yesterday, and we're like, yeah, we need inspiration from our colleagues, and we need to share and learn from one another. So I'm not sure if anyone feels yet comfortable to open up the dialogue, but I certainly would appreciate if someone would take that bold step and talk about what it is they are doing right now, or the plans are in place to do some work around this topic within our community.
Hi, don't know if you guys can see me, but I'm okay with starting first. I'm Brandi Barnett. I am folding clothes. I'm folding clothes at the same time.
Good for you, Brandi. Thanks for multitasking.
Hi, Brandi.
So this is real life right now. So
yes, it is.
what I have, I'm sharing this with the other counselors I used to work with. So I'm super multitasking right now. What I have done is decided to use the platform that I have under Counselor B, which is the Instagram that I use separate from my personal one, to start this topic geared around unconscious bias. And it bounces back and forth between different traditions and races. I was doing this right before this kind of really hit the news media, because sometimes I've worked in Title I. And then here I'm working in a different, I'm split between two schools. So that means that I service two very different populations. And so I started off a conversation of putting up these different images. And one was maybe a lady making soup and noodles. And then there was one maybe someone wearing Jordans. And then there's just different images. There's a police officer. There's all these different things. And so it pretty much asks, what would you like to learn about a set group? And I kind of sub them where it's like A through D, and then you have E, F, G, you know, I have it subbed that way. And I waited till people responded to see what were the majority of the questions. And so we started talking, unpacking it a little bit slowly, but in a tone of not accusing anyone or pointing a finger. So it comes from a place of giving strategies too, of what would you do? How many times have you had a conversation with a kid and use a nickname? Something light as that. What caused you to use the nickname? Did you use the nickname because it was hard for you to pronounce their name? Okay, so did you ask them what their name means or where it comes from versus assuming? So it kind of puts all of us, because I've done that too, use the nickname, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm Southern. And sometimes letters, how I think I'm saying something may not come off that way. And so that was one. And then I used another one where a teacher reached out for some tips and gave me some information. And I was like, okay, so what happened? So I did the nickname one. I did, hold on, let me pull them up. Hold on, this will be really quick because I just sent it. I did strategy 4, student feedback. It talks about welcoming student involvement with asking student what defects do they feel that we have. Of course, we would use a different word. In the learning environment, integrate the use of TED Talks within staff meetings, allow anonymous surveys, assign staff projects to explore diverse reading books, or use icebreakers that educate in a non-accusatory tone. I put things about using more of open-ended questions, promoting more cultural training opportunities, even expanded beyond career day, and mixing it up where you have vocational included in that, because maybe not everybody wants to go to college. Unbiased. I talked about pet names. I talked about how often do we actually, I did this exercise right before school took a huge left turn. Kids were given the assignment of finding a book that reflects you. I didn't want to assume for the kids anymore. Come to me and bring a book that reflects who you are, what you think, your traditions, your beliefs, whatever it is that makes you feel like this is describing me. And during that process, it allowed kids to kind of share with me that they didn't like necessarily reading books that had animals that weren't real to them. They wanted to see a boy or a girl that resembled them. And so I had some kids that talked about, you know, they worship maybe dragons or they worship the sun god or whatever. And it was a way of not saying, hey, color doesn't matter or your religion isn't mine. It was more of, I see you, I acknowledge you, can you teach me? So we came from that point, and then they were given the assignment to maybe create their own book. And this was during guidance. They were able to create their own character and create their own book. And that way it allowed them to feel more welcome versus me putting words in their mouth, but allowing them to have the platform to say, this is me, this is what I believe. The kids listed everywhere that they had family members. We had some that were from, you know, Korea. We had some kids that's from India. And then you have some from places that kids have never heard of, but it allowed them to be able to say, I'm here and I'm present and don't always assume.
Okay. Wow, Brandi, you're doing
That's
a
great.
lot. Good, yeah,
Just pray for me.
definitely. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's
You're welcome.
good work. Thank you for leading
Thank
us
you.
in that, taking that step for us. Was there anyone else who has engaged in this work recently that would like to take the time here and share with their colleagues?
And if people need a little guidance, questions, as sometimes we just need a guide, a few people did reach out to me and submit some questions prior to our conversation today, so I put those in the chat. One was the best way to reach out to students since we are remote. So if people have successful ideas for that, really that could be in general or within this last week, you know, if your efforts have changed. And then how can we ensure that our students of color know as the counselors that we are here for them? If people have started that messaging yet to their students, those would be some great examples of things to share that some of the other participants were looking for today.
That's great. I can just share with you personally, yesterday a group of students had reached out to me and to some other teachers. So we held a group, a Zoom group, and they're middle school students. They were 7th graders. They needed a place just to share the variety of feelings from a fear for their parents, fear for themselves, or just disappointment in behavior. Honestly, the feelings were the gamut: enraged, annoyed. So we just allow them to express their feelings and to share that in a group setting. And we're trying to provide some follow-up, again, doing that in the group setting. So that was initially brought forth by a student, and then the way we did it was put it out to all 7th grade students to participate in that if you're looking for sort of a way. And that was just like join in the conversation to talk about the most recent events that are occurring in our country. So that's just one thing. And again, there were other things that we are doing in my district that I'd like to hear from other people as well.
Eileen, I can just share just a little bit. I know it sounds like with the questions, there's a struggle on how to reach our kids right now when we can't, you know, just grab them from classes or pop into classes or whatever, which I know it's just been frustrating since the beginning. But I just simply sent an email to all my students yesterday morning and just said, hey, I know there's a lot of stuff going on in our country right now and there's a lot of emotions. If you feel like you need to talk to someone, then just email me and we'll set up a time. So I got a lot of very sweet emails. I'm okay, thanks, which was great, mostly from my 5th graders. But I did have a couple 8th grade students reach out to me and say, I don't want to meet to talk about this because I don't feel like I'm in a place to do that. But I just want to share with you how I'm feeling about everything through the email. Great. So we just kind of emailed back and forth. And I said, if you change your mind, I'm happy to do a meet. And even if it's like you had said, Eileen, with a few of you that want to get together and just talk about emotions, like we can do that too. And if you want to invite some of your teachers, because I know the 8th graders in particular are very close to their teachers, I said, you know, we can talk about that too. So I think it was at least a gesture, I feel like, to let the kids know that I'm still here and willing to listen and talk about things if they need to. So
yeah, so that was great, Virginia. You just took the initiative to send out an email to all of your students. And okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and just on one other note, I also challenge my administration because I will be honest, my district is a district who has said nothing, and I am a firm believer that silence says a lot and not a lot of good things. So I felt as a school leader, as a school counselor, I had a responsibility to bring that up, and so I emailed my superintendent and my principal last night and very nicely asked if there was any talk about sending out stuff to our school community. And I referenced the Commissioner of Education's very beautiful and profound letter he sent yesterday about silence not being an option right now. I feel like this is a really hard time, but I think as school counselors, we're often leaders in the building, and our job is to advocate for our students. So I felt that was a way of advocating for my students, that they need to hear from our school community on where we stand and how we can support them. So my understanding is the letter is going up today.
And isn't it so often that the school counselor, it does take that leadership role to sort of nudge and push things forward. So thanks for showing us that, modeling that for us, Virginia.
I say, and to kind of reiterate on that. So, you know, I'm not going to call her out. She's in the call, but one of the school counselors in my department approached our department about it in our daily or our weekly Monday meeting that we have, just like, do we know what the school's doing yet? And we didn't. We hadn't heard from them yet. And she took initiative and she reached out to our central office, and I think they were planning something all along. They just didn't get to the point of where they were sharing that with staff. But I'd say within hours, you know, the response went out. Our district statement went out yesterday. We have a district meeting that also includes, which I think is just something to consider if people are still formulating these teams in their district. Our district's also including like our Parks and Rec department, our youth services office, the police force, that we're really getting our whole community together, not just our school community, and we're asking our students to be involved. Granted, we are at a high school level, but we want them to be involved in the planning pieces of it too, because their voice is so important. And I think we do that with a lot of our committees in the district, that we do like to have student voice and student participation. But I think that sometimes we have to be a squeaky wheel and keep bringing those things up sometimes, especially in districts that just maybe don't, and not that they're, you know, they just don't know how to formulate their response or where to start. You know, in other issues, this has come up as well, where, you know, we, like Eileen said, school counselors sometimes leading the charge to have those conversations begin.
And it's so important to have, to keep your focus in mind that you do this because you want to serve your students, and you know your students, there are students out there who need someone. They need someone to help them to understand and to manage these emotions. I mean, that is what we do when we were in the building. That's what we were doing throughout COVID, and continue to do that. And now we need to be there for them through this situation as well, because they are maybe perhaps aren't all going to reach out to us, but as Virginia did, reaching out to them is it sends a real message to them that this is important and we care. And that's, thank you for everyone who shared so far. Do we have anyone else who has so many other ideas that they've been formulating, working on, planning, or actually have executed?
I know it, Patty Cohen from East Hartford High School.
Hi.
Our superintendent was definitely on top of it. He sent out a beautiful letter to our families, and then our principal, our social workers were in the Google classrooms. But as I'm listening, I'm thinking maybe our human rights teachers are percolating, and maybe I should contact them and just see if they have any ideas. I know our director of school counseling attends courageous conversation meetings. I'm thinking, why can't we bring those on to the student level, you know, in the fall, or even now, you know, via Zoom, and also contacting Parks and Rec and the town. I didn't think of that, but I know in the next town over, they're having a walk on Sunday, in Glastonbury. So I don't know if I'll see any of our kids. I'm kind of hesitating, not sure what leadership role I should take in sending all that info out, but I'm now going to contact some people and get some feedback. So thank you for the ideas.
The other thing we are working on, CSCA is working on, and I will thank Virginia on this call, because I kind of was like, can you do this and get this started, because she did such a great job with our COVID resources. But we are trying to create a kind of a storehouse of good resources about social injustice, racism, and really even, I think, eventually expanding that, you know, to helping, you know, a lot of disenfranchised populations have resources about, you know, LGBTQ, like other issues that, you know, topics that have come up that people have said, hey, do we have good resources on this? So that is in the works. It's not live to people yet to be viewable, because we are still trying to gather it, to have things on there. But a lot of the questions I see coming in on the chat, people are really looking for ways to start conversations, especially if they're in a school where their population is primarily Caucasian. So I don't know if anyone has any experience, whether it's right now that you're having those conversations with your kids, or even strategies you've used in the past to have these conversations about what racism is, about what anti-racism is, especially when kind of dealing with a Caucasian population, so that it's a productive conversation. If anyone has feedback on that they would like to share, I invite them to with the group.
Our school has been doing a professional learning environment. Here, let me undo my video. Hi there. So our school's been doing a professional learning environment about dismantling inequity in education. We're primary, so K-1-2, and feel like the work that we do is foundational for anti-bullying, assertiveness, and addressing issues like Black Lives Matter, and making sure that our kids have vocabulary as they move on to 3rd grade. So the district's been very supportive in creating a class that we're doing a lot of work, and I don't mean to do a shameless plug, but one of the things the community has been supporting is a class I'll be teaching that I've gotten support from Black educators who have vetted my content, so that, but the title, I tried to stay in my lane, the title is Dismantling Inequity in Education in a Predominantly White Community. So the focus has been the engagement of white staff, so that when we're doing these presentations, when we're decolonizing our bookshelves, and when we're decolonizing our language and our units, that we're also making sure that we're explicitly speaking to the populations that white culture has marginalized. And so we're all like vocabulary, our signs, our representation around the building, but then our deep dive into history, and accurate history, and then accurate historical representation. And so that's been a focus. We call each other out pretty hard on that. And our district put out a message, our counseling staff did, but actually it started with our PE teacher, who was just fantastic, and put out a message. And then in our messages, we made sure, not at the K-1-2 level, but at the larger level, using the word murder, using the word Black Lives Matter, talking about this has been an ongoing systemic issue for much time. This is not an event that occurred within the last couple of days. And then we also have, as a counseling team, have been calling out poorly written letters by other administrations, and doing rewrites for them, all very much aware that we are a predominantly white community, and that we need to be centering the voices of people of color as I sit here on this thing, taking up volume and space as a white woman. So I know that that is in some way an act of centering myself. So thank you, I'll say no more.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that that's so important, that our language that we're using every day, not just this week or next week, that is a change we all really actively need to make. I mean, so many people in this call have heard the whole, we get mad about the word guidance counselor over school counselor, right? And we want that language change, and that's important to us. So these language changes are important steps to take to show our students of color, and right now our Black students, that we support them, and we want to use the appropriate language. We don't want to, kind of like go around what we should be talking about. We want to be direct in what we're talking about to address the issue. I think that our language that we use is just as important as the message sometimes in the work that we're doing. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and kudos to you, to all the work that you're doing. It sounds like your team very strongly has embodied that, and that's very impressive.
Michelle, can I just make a couple of points?
Of course.
Yes, if you do have any resources that you're using for your parents, for your students, for your school communities that you think are helpful, please, by all means, you can email them to me. I did put my email in the chat. I can put it in there a little bit later too. And I'll be happy to look at those resources to potentially put up on our resource page that we're developing. I also encourage you to send me, it is Pride Month, so I do encourage you, I've been really trying to focus on, everything that's going on right now, but not forgetting about our LGBTQ community, because it is Pride Month, and they're another highly marginalized group in our country too. So, we want to provide you with those resources for students as well, and families. So yes, please email me whatever you have. You can put them in the chat too, because I think I'll be able to get to the chat later. Yeah, I can get to the chat later, so I can pull those resources out if that's easier, if you're thinking about it right now.
Yeah, and you all are being, there's so many resources that are being put in the chat right now. So please copy those links. I hope you all are following that. People are looking for elementary resources. I see someone has put them in there. So just keep following the chat. You guys are offering each other a lot of great stuff here.
And my only other point is I feel another way to help our students is by educating ourselves. And I have tried to come from a place of love and compassion while working with others to help them to educate themselves on, anti-racism and what that all means. There's so many layers. And I know it's hard for people to hear and accept sometimes what you have to say, because they feel like, they don't want to be called a racist. But I think it's important for us to kind of take a look at ourselves and figure out what we have to learn. And I feel like I have a lot to learn. And I've been doing some of this work for a couple of years now. And I still am being taught and educated by others who are also coming from a place of love and compassion towards me and saying, hey, you really shouldn't say things like this, or you need to think about that. And I think that ultimately is important for me in being able to help my students, because in order to have some of these conversations and be able to help them to realize and understand, I also need to kind of know what I'm talking about. And it's a pretty complex issue. So I invite you and encourage you to really kind of dig down deep and figure out what biases you might have and what things you need to work on yourself in order to really truly be the best counselor you can be for all of your students.
So one initiative in my district, which took place, actually, we started it this fall when some students were using some really offensive language. We actually we're predominantly white community in Mansfield. And so what we did is, as school counselors and school psychologists, is we called every family of color in the district and just had conversations with the parents so we could get a read on how their children were responding and how their family was responding, and if there was anything that we could do to support them. And my principal has asked that we do that again. So that'll be happening. We haven't done it yet. So just sharing that as a way, if you do live in a community that's similar to the one that I explained, that I am in, you might try that as a way of at least getting a read on the needs, and certainly not assuming, because families have different, I think if Virginia said this, people's experience with this is not just either or. There's so many different layers to this, and different ways of the way they're experiencing it. So just being mindful of that, I have learned a lot in my conversations.
Something that showed up in the chat, which I keep having to scroll back because you guys are putting amazing things in the chat as far as resources. So really, really appreciate that. And we will make sure everyone, whether you're in this call today or not, that gets out to you. so that we all have that. But someone, Gino, I'm going to call you out a little bit, but you had talked about in September that there's an International Peace Day and that your high school has done things in the past. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? You suggested maybe that's something that a lot of us can embrace and do that together. So if you're comfortable sharing, if you could tell us a little bit more about what that looks like for your district.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. Hi. Thank you guys for doing this. Yeah. Basically, myself and another teacher a couple years ago donated a international peace pole. It's the International Peace Pole Project. You can just Google it, and it's an awesome project that's been going on for years all over the world. It's a very standard kind of pole, 7 feet tall or so. It could be made of wood, could be made of plastic, but it has "May peace prevail on earth." On each side, there's 4 sides. We chose that in Britain because it's so diverse. We couldn't capture all the languages that are spoken, but we chose Spanish, Arabic, Polish, and English. So we planted it right in front by the flag. So since we did that a couple years ago, we've been going out on International Peace Day and doing a little ceremony or just recognizing peace and what that means to our community in Britain, but also what it could mean to others. When there were school shootings recently, that took that kind of message and brought it to the forefront, and students used the peace pole to gather and to express their concerns around guns in school and etc. But now with everything that's going on in our world, gosh, I mean, it's all connected, right? But I could see that day as maybe morphing into, especially as we regather as schools in the fall. I would hope that there's something that unites us all, right? So since it's already a date that's on the calendar, I would love to see more schools kind of join that. And if we're all out there together, whether you have a peace pole or not, that could be a strong message to send to our state, our nation, and our world.
That's a great idea.
I love that.
Yeah, our school actually has that peace pole, but I
Right.
never thought of having a ceremony around it about a particular topic. So thanks, Gino. That's a great idea.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you.
Love it.
And thank you for letting me just call you call you out to
Yeah.
share with us.
All good, all good.
Yeah, I think a few of you are like, whoa, these resources are really great. Can you slow them down? So Virginia's responded. She's working on putting them together on the website. Okay, so don't worry. But
Yeah,
if you need it,
we'll definitely make sure there's so much good stuff in there. We'll make sure you get it. I'm trying to look through the comments to see if there are any specific questions or more people I can shout out to to talk about things that they're doing. So if someone does have a question they want to post to the group or something they want to share, please feel free to do so.
I have a question. It's Kathryn Goldberg. I am curious if anyone, so I'm a white woman. I work in a school that serves predominantly Black and brown students. Would like to be able to hold space for our white staff to be able to come together and process in a way that doesn't put emotional burdens on our staff of color. I'm just curious if there's anyone who has done that before, who would either be willing to share resources or be willing to connect one-on-one offline, because I want to do it well, or I want to do it to the best that I can. And so that's an open question to everyone.
It's a great question.
and Kathryn, it's clearly a need. From people's silence at this point, I'm guessing, and again, not always good to guess, so correct me if I'm not reading it right. It's a tough one to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that sometimes as school counselors, we don't know if that's our place to do that. Although I do think it is. And I applaud you for even considering doing that, because it is a burden to those few on staffs that are the staff of color to be handling and fielding everyone's emotional experience with this. So I don't know. So if people want to, is there anyone? Yeah.
I'll talk to it.
Oh, great. Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Katrina Steele. I'm a counselor educator now, but 14 years in the school system in high school. and 2 years as a director of guidance before.
Where are you at, Dr. Steele?
Thomasville, Georgia.
Awesome.
Oh,
Wow. Welcome from Georgia. All right.
I saw the link this morning and I said, I am joining this conversation.
Great. Happy to have you.
Thank you. I worked in Portsmouth, Virginia for a long time, and it is a Title I district. I had students, my students of color were over the students that were white, and as far as demographics go, but they still felt very disenfranchised, not heard, and didn't know really how to accept themselves as well. So there was a lot of confusion. And the one thing I can say that we as school counselors have is we have love. And you just accept everyone. And they would, when I first got there, when I was a young school counselor, they would my students would test me with different scenarios to see how I would react and how I would respond. And when it was nothing but love, they would come and they would tackle these issues with me, like their own identities. I had students that were from the Caribbean, and they were very beautiful, dark black, but they had a problem with finding guys to date them, and they blamed it on their color. And they talked about problems within the community that they saw. And I let them express themselves, but I also gave them back do you see how beautiful you are? And a lot of times what people need is to hear. And one of the greatest things I have right now is I'm watching on Facebook as my former students who have graduated, most of them from college now, they are active. And they are out there and they are letting their voices be heard, and they're not afraid. And these are my black and my white students, and they are standing together, and I love it. I love it. And I'm supporting them all I can, through even, monitoring yourself is really hard, because you feel like, because I'm white, I really can't talk about the subject. Well, you may not be able to talk about the subject to tell people how they should feel, but we can listen, we can acknowledge, and that is so important. Because if we as school counselors ignore this and act like this did not happen, then that is a bigger statement than ever saying, I see you, and I want to understand, and I want to hear you. And I want you to know that I support you in all that you are and all that you will be. And that this is not your own fight. It's not blacks versus white. It is us versus racism. And that is something that needs to be heard. I mean, it doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. I mean, I grew up in the state of Virginia. I was an Army brat. So I've been all over, and it doesn't matter where you're at, or the people that you come in contact with have created who you are. And we can only speak from our experiences. But I think that it's important for us to listen, especially with our white privilege, and understanding that white privilege is not something that we can ignore. When you have these protests going on, and when the white protesters stand in front of the black protesters and things change, well, that is right there in front of us saying that this is a huge systemic problem. It was created this way. It didn't just pop up here overnight. It's historical, and it's deep, and it's rooted. And we need to be able to recognize that the founders of this country did a lot of really bad stuff. And we can see that the good stuff doesn't outweigh the bad stuff, and the bad stuff doesn't outweigh the good stuff. It is what it is now, but we need to create something moving forward. And sometimes that means tearing up and really digging deep into our own beliefs and saying, this isn't right. And I'm standing up. My husband and I had this talk last night. I said, I have made a vow that if I see anything, I'm going to physically stop it. I am not just an ally in voice, but I'm an ally every time I step outside of my apartment, every time I'm inside my apartment, every time that I talk to anybody. Doesn't matter, Black, white, Hispanic, anyone, immigrants, we are the allies, and we have to be strong that way. And that's that part of the advocacy that ASCA really wants us to be emboldened with. And when I was there, I didn't understand. I didn't really understand until now, really the power that we hold as school counselors to really just embrace and support our family. And our family includes the parents, all those stakeholders are our family. And so, you know, just support each other, but also recognize that we need to look inside.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for joining us today and sharing that. I did think you made some excellent points. Listening to our students is supporting them, and that is certainly one thing we need to do. Is there anyone else here? We have about 10 more minutes on our call here. So I just want to make sure people have an opportunity to share, to speak, to ask a question before we have to get back to the many other duties. Go ahead, Deandra.
Hi, everyone. Let me put my camera on. My name is Deandra, and I'm a recent graduate from the University of Connecticut School Counseling Program, but I've also been in education for the past 7 years. I've worked at a charter school with predominantly Black and Brown students. And I want to give a shout out to Virginia, because you really touched on some things that really settled with me, in a sense that, like, as adults that are working in Black and Brown schools, we need to self-reflect, reflect on our own biases. There's this post on social media, overt white supremacy, which are socially unacceptable, and the covert white supremacy, which are socially acceptable. And I think we need to speak to adult culture, right? Like, sometimes being a Black woman or a Black man within a school where we're the minorities, you know, we face so many covert racism, you know, things like, oh, you speak so well, you know, you're so articulate, or, you know, all lives matter, or, you know, things that, like, you know, victim blaming, because sometimes, you know, we are in a space where we blame students, right? Because we lack the understanding of where they come from, the narrative that they have. You know, or don't blame me, I didn't have slaves, or my family didn't have slaves, you know what I mean? So, like, there's so many covert racisms that happen within the school building that affects the adults that work there, and it also trickles down to the students as well. And, you know, sometimes there are pressures on Black staff members to, you know, to save the Black students when, you know, a person who, you know, a Caucasian person might say something that, like, really upset them, and we have to go and save the day, you know? So I think that, you know, as this is a great discussion, and I think that, you know, a way to move forward is really to address and to really self-reflect and on who you are as a school counselor. Like, what are you bringing to the table? What are you bringing to the adult culture? What are you saying to the students, right? Non-verbally, right? Because we can, you know, we can say things that are, you know, verbal all the time, like, we are your ally, we're here for you. But if your Black and Brown students do not feel that they can connect and that you understand, then, you know, your words doesn't really mean anything, and it's your actions that do. And, you know, I think that that's something that we really need to dive into. And I think, Kathryn, going back to you, I used to work at Achievement First in Hartford, the high school. And I think I agree that, you know, there needs to be a space for, you know, white staff members to really like come and reflect without being a burden on other staff members of color. And I think it's something that you have to go for it and just do. And in that space, right, like, of course, as school counselors, we know how to make a space, a safe space for people to truly, you know, say what they need to say. But like, I think that understanding that, I think Virginia touched on this, educating yourself. You have to educate yourself on what it means to be a white person working around Black and brown students, and what are you bringing to the table to ensure that they are safe? Are you telling them what they want to hear? Or are you being an ally and working side by side with them and advocating for them? That's just what I just wanted to add to the conversation. I know I'm new to school counseling, but I'm not new to the world of education. Ms. Cohen, we've met at East Hartford Middle School. Yeah, that's what I just wanted to add to the conversation. Just, you know, really self-reflect and reflect on your own biases and what you're bringing to the table. Just ensure that the people that you're working with, both adults and students, are comfortable and feel comfortable around you.
That was so great. And I'm so glad you're coming into the world of school counseling, because we need more school counselors like you. So thank you for sharing and for your experience, you know, your experience as a teacher, but, you know, just in general and from this conversation. I really appreciate that.
And if I could also jump in on this as a, just to talk a little bit about the CSCA and the CSCA's needs. We need more people to speak up. We are a skeleton crew at times, and we apologize if we did not get this to you quickly enough. We're not as responsive in getting things to you in a way that is even faster. It's just, as I said, we're people that have full-time jobs and families and yada, 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 like you all. So we're doing our very best. But if you have a need, if you could just say it to us, you know, I think we're pretty accessible. But also, and probably more importantly, is we need you to be not just attending things, but actually be willing to perhaps host something. We're really open to that, especially with our Zoom platform. Partner with us, volunteer. You know, we had sent out call for nominations for different board positions and committees, and we got a few. And we appreciate those people who have done that. But we need more people to step up. And I know Virginia can speak to this as the government relations person. You know, we're working so hard to have a school counselor in every building in Connecticut. That's a lofty goal. That's our ultimate goal, and it's just tough. It's tough. And I'm going to stop talking because I think Virginia might want to add to that.
Yeah, so we have a lot of great goals for CSCA in terms of school counseling, and, you know, our ultimate goal is to have at least one school counselor in every building at every level, so elementary through high school. And, you know, we've made a lot of headway the last couple of years with legislators. We really started to make some great headway this legislative season, and then COVID happened and ruined everything because the legislative season, as you may or may not know, literally just stopped. They only passed one bill, and I don't even know what it was on, but we testified literally, a few days before they shut down the government, essentially. So we're still fighting that fight. Our agenda was to push for 80-20, meaning that you're being allowed to spend 80% of your time minimum doing your job as a school counselor, because we know there are so many of you who get tasked with non-counseling duties that make it difficult for you to do your job. And I think in some respects, some counselors have found they've been able to do their job a little bit more because some of those tasks they haven't had to do not being at school. So, you know, we still want that to be able to happen. But I just wanted to comment to Deandra. It doesn't matter how long you've been in this profession. What you have to say is important and is valuable. We actually, on the CSCA board, we love our grad students in particular because they have new ideas and are like thinking in ways that us that have been doing this for years and years kind of get stuck, you know, in the same old patterns. So I appreciate that you shared what you shared. It also made me feel better that am not completely off topic or, in my thinking. But I think that there are some of us probably on this call could have been doing this for like 30 something years, and we're still at a loss. I've been doing this for 16 years, but I still was like, what do I do, right? So I think it's good to hear from everybody, no matter how long you've been doing this. And that speaks to Eileen's point that even being on the board, like I know some people are like, well, I don't know enough about being a school counselor yet to be on the board. That's crazy. We take everybody and anyone who's just passionate about being a school counselor. I've learned so much about being a school counselor just from being on the board for the last 7 years. So I think that, everybody's experiences can be helpful in that sense and in our advocacy efforts, because legislators need to hear your voices for us to be able to make changes within this profession. And they don't, as much as I will keep fighting the fight for us, at some point they're going to probably not want to listen to me anymore. So they need to hear from all of you. And there's lots of ways you can do that when we put out calls for stuff, to contribute in that way, or letter writing to your legislators, talking to your school boards about the needs for school counselors, all of those things. So there's lots of different ways to get involved depending on your comfort level.
So we have a person who wants to speak, Rebecca Wilson.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I work for the Stanford Public Schools. I was in the school building as a school counselor for 10 years, and then I moved on to central office, and I oversee the school counseling program in Stanford. And so I just thought I wanted to share some thoughts being a Black woman and very active in my community, active in my Black community, and active in my school community. And so one of the things I want to share is that one thing is important is over the last maybe the last 2-3 months, we've had lots of conversations about COVID-19 and the coronavirus. And I've brought this up to some of my colleagues, is in this recent week, when we start our meetings and our conversations, no one talks about Black lives that are being lost or things that are happening. And it's interesting that we had all of these COVID conversations for the last 3 months, day by day. Is your dog all right? Is your mother all right? Are you okay? And then we have what we have going on in the world today for the last week. And we start our meetings and we move on, and no one acknowledges that Black lives are, Black lives matter, or the issues the injustices that we're facing day to day, but the recent events. And I brought that up to my leadership team because I explained to them that this is about invisibility. And this is about a group of people who have felt invisible for a very long time. And we're tired of feeling invisible, and we want to matter. We don't want to be treated as second-class citizens. And when you don't acknowledge us, and when you don't acknowledge what is going on, you perpetuate the invisibility of what we feel. And maybe unintentionally, but certainly neglectfully, in terms of our meetings and being able to address the issues that are going on. You may not have the answer the answer to solving any of these problems. However, I think people like me just want to know that we matter, and want to know that when things are impacting our community, that it impacts everyone's community. This is not just about the Black community being impacted. Whether you're directly or indirectly impacted, you are impacted. And so I just want to be be loud and clear.
Oh no.
I know. There was someone else who also wanted to speak.
That is part of the problem and not part of the solution. And so I want to, with that, I also had the opportunity to reflect on what I could do as a Black woman, and also help my colleagues, Black or otherwise. What are things they can do? Is one thing is important is that we speak up. And as a Black person in the Black community, we have to speak up for ourselves, and we have to make it be known that we want to be seen. Because when people are invisible and they continue to be invisible, they do what you have now. They pump up the volume to let you know that they're there and they exist and they matter. So that's one of the things. And then for the communities that are not Black, what are things that they can do? Sometimes it's a mere acknowledgement. of the issue that's happening in the world. That matters. That's really important, because you acknowledge COVID-19 for 3 months because everybody was impacted, so to speak. Everybody's still impacted by Black Lives Matters and the issues that we're facing. And the other two things that I thought about, and it's really echoing the sentiments of many of you who already mentioned some of these things, are being aware of your own, sort of your standing in the world and how that impacts other people. And so once you have that level of awareness with self, is also, I would want you to know what's going on in my community, what's being faced by my community day by day. I want you to turn on the news and understand the protests. And I'm out there protesting, but are you out there protesting with us? So I think that that's important. That reflection is important. And the last point I want to say is that when you couple those things together, the awareness of others, the awareness of self, you come up with action. And really be actionable in your intentions. I was thinking about my daughter who's in a class, and she's one of 60, and she's 4 Black kids and the other are white kids. And she told me how everyone's posting says Black Lives Matter and we love you and this and that. But she said when it came to a conversation that they had as a group in her class, no one said anything when the conversation came up. No one said anything outside of her, out of 60 people. And so it's really about having actionable and not just intention, but really action. And what action can you take? One of my white colleagues said, Rebecca, I've been thinking about this weekend, and the one thing that I can do is when I hear something, say something. If it's not right for adults, because everything that you carry on as adults is the same thing you're doing with your kids. If you're ignoring this as an adult issue, you're ignoring it with your students. And so those are three things that I just want to leave with you today, is that self reflecting in our community, and also be actionable, not just put up a posting here and there.
Rebecca, thank you so much for that. And I think that that's something a lot of the people came in with, that question of what can I be doing? And I think you just gave us some really good goals of what we can be doing right now, how we can leave this call and the next meeting we go into, maybe change the way we're approaching the meeting, the Black people that are in that meeting with us. I know personally that hearing what you said just makes me put a different lens on how I need to be very intentional and show my action to back up what I believe, to support my colleagues, to support my students, to support even the people I don't know, so thank you very much for giving us some actionable things to be doing. And I don't know who the person was. Eileen did have to step out because she went to her meeting, but there was one more person who said they wanted the opportunity to speak, but I don't have their name if that person does want to speak up.
Hi, Michelle, that was Millie, it was me.
Hi, Millie.
Hi. Hi. So I guess, of course, that's a hard act to follow, Rebecca, but I think what I wanted to say was, sort of thinking about in many ways as a professional school counselor. I'm a professional school counselor that graduated last year and have not been able to find an actual position as a school counselor, but I work in workforce development right now. So that's obviously a very strong connection and continuation to what school counselors do. And I work with some of the most difficult populations in terms of how the employer world feels about people of color, specifically in the South End of Hartford. And I find it really important and energizing to be part of this conversation. So while I don't have the same microcosm environment as having students and in a school district, it matters very much to me because I have to keep having conversations, both as a self-reflection for myself, and also with manufacturers. I work in the industry of manufacturing, but with other partners in the field, other social service providers, and also with employers as well. We're still trying to chip away with understanding how people of color have been disadvantaged for so long, even hiring practices and retention, and also just some basic HR management that's happened in our industry for a long time that have really kept people down. So I don't know, I just wanted to say thank you for that. And that school counseling, even if you're a certified school counselor, which I am, it extends beyond that K-12 moment. And I also put in there about how I thought it was a really, for me, even personally as a mom and having conversations with my kids right now who are in college and middle school is about understanding your own unconscious bias. And I did put that website in there for Harvard if anybody's ever gone on that, because it includes many different kinds of bias that we might have. And some of the things I was surprised, I really thought I'd be biased about, and I really wasn't. And some that I thought I'd be okay with, I was. So it was a great reflection, and I think that's why I have a good friend I work with through the United Way, and we talk about cultural competency, and he says, no, it's cultural humility. Because you'll never understand exactly what it's like to walk in my shoes. And I said, absolutely not. But I do believe that it's a lifelong journey, that my job is to constantly reflect on understanding how privilege affects me, understanding what's going on in our environment, our educational, workplace, cultural, world microcosms, to really understand that. And it's like, it's not a destination. It's a long time journey. That's kind of how I look at it. And I really appreciate everything that CSCA does, because I feel strongly in my heart, I'm a school counselor no matter where I am and however I practice. And I think everything you do, and so if you think you're somebody who might not want to be on the board, or you're not too sure you want to take something on, honest to God, I mean, CSCA's been a great support to me and a great network and a great means of continued professional development. And I just appreciate having this conversation, because it's not something that would have been sponsored by my work for sure. So I just really appreciate it.
Thanks, Millie. You know, and I'd say to end this, because I know I actually see a lot of people are saying I have to go to a meeting. I think that the point that you just made, Millie, that this is a journey. And first of all, thank you to everyone who shared. Thank you to everyone who's just on here listening. And hopefully you can take things back from this. Thank you for all of the resources that you've provided for us. We'll get that out to you. But I don't think this should be our last conversation on this topic. I think that, you know, clearly there is a need for this support, and, you know, that these conversations will be ongoing. I know we're a little zoomed out, and we're ready to shut down this online platform for the summer, but we will provide more opportunities. Laura just posted in the chat, we do have a Counselors of Color group that does meet during the year. That was started this past year. Eileen was heavily involved in getting that off the ground, and we have some wonderful people from our board. I know Shaka McIntyre-Felder is very involved with it. But certainly that group will continue as well. We want to offer support, and we certainly welcome your feedback on how we can do better for you. Because I might be the executive director of CSCA, but I don't know everything about school counseling, and I don't know everything about every issue that's out there. I learn from all of you on every single one of these calls I come in. So I'm always open to having conversation. And of course, as so many people have said, I invite you to be active on our board with CSCA, because we are better because of the people who get involved and put these things out. So I appreciate everybody's time. Can you provide more information about the group, the Counselors of Color group, if that's what the question was? Yes, when we send out these resources, I'll make sure that people know how to get linked up to that group as well, so they know when that one's meeting. And, you know, I do have to go into another meeting now as well. So thank you all very, very much. Keep fighting the good fight. And, you know, I hope the end of your school year, you know, continues to get closer and closer as this has been a difficult year, and especially this last week has been even more trying. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.